Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 100 of Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. This is the centennial episode of this small, meager podcast. How are you, Sam?
Doing well. I am currently solo parenting. Haley is off in Las Vegas, Nevada for a conference, and I've got Poppy to myself, which is great because she's great, and then also terrifying because you never know when all of a sudden she's going to really need her mom and I cannot provide. But so far, so good. And it's funny because Haley left really early this morning, and then she was on a 4-hour flight, so radio silence. And then as soon as she lands, she sends a text saying, "I landed. I hate it here." Las Vegas is not her
Welcome to
style.
Vegas. I know that
Yeah.
airport sucks. I don't know. I'm sure I talked about it because we were doing the podcast during
Oh,
this
you were
experience.
stuck there for hours, right?
But I was stuck there overnight once,
That's
and
right.
trying to sleep in a terminal in Las Vegas when you hear slot machines
Slot
going
machines.
all
Yes.
night. Yeah, that was horrific. That was a
Yeah.
horrific experience.
Yeah.
So 100 episodes.
Yeah, but that's the more important milestone.
Yeah.
100. It's funny because it doesn't feel like we've been doing this that long, but it's over 2 years at this point. We
Yeah. And
started
then
with
you think back on, like, we took weeks off too. Like,
yeah,
there were a
yeah,
couple times where we took like 3-4 weeks off.
yeah, around the
And
holidays. I think lately it's been a little bit harder too with just life schedules, but here we are, 100 episodes. So we're gonna do a little look back and kind of talk about some of our favorite either favorite topics that we covered, episodes that stick out in your mind. We've covered a lot of fantasy topics, obviously a heavy emphasis on Lord of the Rings and related content, but also Legends of Vox Machina, season 1 and season 2. Season 3 is upcoming. We've talked to authors in the fantasy space. We've talked to bands that play at Renaissance fairs. We've covered stories in pop culture about fantasy related topics. We talked about The Witcher, talked about Andor.
all
So
right,
Sean,
save it for the podcast. Jeez.
oh, this is the podcast.
All right, save it for the conversation.
All right.
Covering
Sorry.
so many different things.
I'm just reminding our
I know,
audience what
yes.
we've talked about.
I think for me, my favorite things, I think, were the interviews when we were able to actually talk to people. Because we Colin McComb, which is very cool. As a D&D player, it was really cool to see like the behind the scenes shit of what it was like to actually produce material for the game. And then the interviews with Renaissance Fair bands, because that is a very cool thing that they do, to be able to just hang out and kind of get a little bit behind the scenes of what it's like to be a performer at an event that goes 3-4 weekends long. In the case of Michigan, it's, what is it, 6-8 weekends, something like
Yeah,
that.
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a pretty substantial time commitment that people are putting in for the enjoyment of everybody else. And it is fun. I think I gathered from those interviews to do what they do. But I think you hit a point too where it just kind of gets exhausting, because as a Ren Fair goer, by the end of 4 hours of just attending fair, you can be pretty tired. And then
Oh,
it's
totally.
funny, I follow both the Scupper Monkeys and Wakefire on Facebook, and sometimes they'll post like behind the scenes images of them like in between performances, and everybody's just kind of napping on the ground and
I
trying to
bet. Yeah.
shade themselves. And yeah, so I think the interviews for me were some of my highlights personally, because I was able to learn a lot about things that I love. And then the other thing was our little foray into Lovecraft.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because I
Yeah.
thought that was a great change of pace for us, because we were
hmm
doing a lot of like TV, film, all of that. And then we went to books, and it was nice to be able to just kind of slow down and read and then talk about kind of like a horror, occult, sci-fi kind of deal. It was pretty cool.
Well, okay. Well, I'll do the boring thing and endorse everything you said. I think that some of the stories from Colin McComb about working at TSR and the what it was like there and him coming up through fantasy and sci-fi was a lot of fun. And I think I've got to go back and refresh refresh myself about his recommendations and follow up on those. Same thing with talking to the folks from Scupper Monkeys and Wakefire. That was a lot of fun. Again, kudos to and thank you to our guests who have come on. We've had a couple people join us for both obviously the interviews and also some guest participants. I think one of the things that you didn't mention that I'll throw out there was our watch of Andor, which was
Mm.
obviously Star Wars, space opera, fantasy, space fantasy. So people call it sci-fi, but I kind of disagree with that. Um, and I'm just recalling the fact that I had such a negative reaction to the first episode, and you were like, "No, no, no, you're totally wrong. You need to keep going." And then you were totally right about that. I did need to keep going, and so I like it when there are these examples of learning, of giving something a little bit more time. I feel like I can be a quick to judge, but then I'm also not afraid to admit when I was wrong.
And I think we're just so jaded on other
For plenty of
properties
reasons.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, that we just hate. So I think going back to even like the final season of Game of Thrones, I think that's when I just had like a pessimistic view on some material. And when that first episode comes out and you don't care for it as much as you were hoping, then you begin to spiral. And I
Hmm.
think Rings of Power did that for me. Game of Thrones did that. Yeah. And I agree with you. Like that first episode of Andor, I didn't love, but then that show by the halfway point was really gearing up for like peak. Like this is what Star Wars should be. That's what
Yeah.
Andor was.
And I mean, I don't want to turn this into a kind of an Andor podcast. Not that there's a ton to talk about there, because have we gotten a season two update? I think it was greenlit a while ago. No update since then that I've seen. And granted, I'm not
Yeah.
out there looking actively for it, but do you know anything?
I think they're only going to do one more season.
Yeah. Well, make it good.
Yeah.
They had a really strong start. They got some fun characters, and it's a different side of the Star Wars universe that they got very lucky. I think they picked a good story, they approached it the right way, and they got some really good performances. And,
The only other thing besides
yeah,
Andor that Star Wars has done really, really well, the two Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor games.
I'm not a big
I
video
told,
game,
I know you're not
Star Wars
anymore
video
because
gamer.
you're a dad and all this shit and you don't have time. You should make time or at least read the plot synopsis on Wikipedia because if there was ever a story to turn into a film, and I doubt they would do it because I've already fleshed out all of the story in the video games, but the two video games in particular are phenomenal. Uh, the Jedi Survivor, I just finished playing it. I played it on the easiest mode because I only really cared about the story. So I found myself at the end. I think it was last Friday. Carly went to a Halloween party, and I just stayed home for like 6 hours and just played the
Good for
game.
you.
It
Good for you.
was it was so good. Yeah, I told Carly at the end, I was like tearing up from the story. I was like, this
Wow.
is such good storytelling. So between those two games and Andor, and I guess Mandalorian, there that one like
First two seasons.
comes and goes.
I'll
Yeah.
say I don't think I even watched the third season of The Mandalorian. Some of that was based off of just kind of my lagging interest in it, but I think it was kind of a mixed reception. Looking back at some of our other episodes, the Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves movie, the one that was released in 2023, I know it didn't do all that well, but it seems to have developed a significant enough following where there is interest in, I think, a live action show spun off from that, or in the D&D vein, which should be fun if that happens. And then you mentioned the Game of Thrones, and on the
Mhm.
topic of movies, there was recently announced that there's going to be a Game of Thrones movie, or I should say, it was announced that there's a Game of Thrones movie in development. That's very far cry from there's a confirmed Game of Thrones movie, but there's a potential. So my hope is that the studios that are responsible for the studios that are going to do fantasy are looking at the good and the bad of Game of Thrones, Rings of Power, The Witcher, the D&D movie, and they are incrementally making improvements. I'm optimistic about the War of the Rohirrim anime, Lord of the Rings, but we will see. So I think, looking ahead for the future of this podcast, we should have some good some good stuff to cover. Knock on wood. It's both interesting quality and sufficient volume. What was your, I don't want to say your least favorite episode, but what was the thing that we covered that you were the least enthused for?
The thing that we covered that I was the least enthused for, probably The Witcher, I think. That
Okay.
that second season. And I think for me it was because we knew, or third season, whatever season it was. I don't care about it enough to even remember. But I think for me it was knowing Henry Cavill was leaving, knowing that the writers were like destroying the source material. And I can't say for sure because we haven't seen the recasting, how that's going to go. But I mean, personally, I've already have these preconceived notions that I'm going to hate the recast. So sorry, Liam Hemsworth. I'm not looking forward to your take. And I don't know enough that the writers are going to fix some of the issues that they had. So
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
I
I
mean,
mean, I think that would be it. That would be my answer.
yeah, that the Witcher was pretty tough. I think maybe more so because I was relatively fresh from listening to the audiobooks and just the juxtaposition between the quality of story that is in the original books compared to how it was being presented on screen was so frustrating. And then just I mean, The Witcher also, we talked about it, like just really bad dialogue. I had a big issue with a lot of the performances, not from Cavill or some of the other, like the main leads, but just a lot of the supporting people. That was tough. Yeah, The Witcher was tough. Then I'll say the other thing was our brief sojourn into Ralph Bakshi with the animated Lord of the Rings movie and then Wizards, which was, I think of the Wizards is probably the single worst thing that we watched. And obviously there's many decades of time between when it came out and now. And I think Colin is like, for its time, there was an audience. But talk about movies that didn't hold up, and then say what you will about the Ralph Bakshi Lord of the Rings and how it directly inspired certain shots in Tolkien, and it was an ambitious project to take on at the time. But that was also just a very disappointing and frustrating and visually disappointing depiction.
Oh yeah, dude. If anything, I just came away. My takeaway was I hate rotoscoping.
Yeah,
It. I don't care how ahead of its time it was. I think it just looks terrible. And then we had the moment where we were talking about the Lord of the Rings and the scene where the actor fell, and then they just animated it and kept it in. And it's like that's how little care they took
I
into creating their film.
having just done a little bit of research for that, I recall that they had massive budget issues, which was probably like one. They probably only had one take, and the character and the actor fell during that take, and they're like, "All right, just roll with it," because he gets up and whatever. But then also like all the rotoscoping is just a way to animate, quote unquote, animate, but do it cheaply. And it's just funny. I can't remember if we talked about it on the podcast for that episode, but they took old movie footage, including like the John Wayne Genghis Khan movie or like Attila the Hun. Like John Wayne played some Central Asian warlord in some movie in the 50s or 60s, and they took that, and that's what they're rotoscoping over for like all of the scenes of the Rohirrim riding around during the Two Towers portion. So
Mm-hmm.
it's just that was a fun little time capsule, but definitely one of the most disappointing things that we covered.
Shall we switch gear?
Yeah, yeah. So I would say, Sean, thank you for being a co-host for 100 episodes. It's always, I would say the other highlight is just spending time together, if not every week, then, a couple times a month. And, this is always a fun opportunity for, Haley to pop in and say hi to you. And obviously, we're separated by an entire country and, 3.5 hours of plane travel. But this is a nice way and I look forward to doing it, especially when my daughter is going to be able to,
Come
well,
back and
when
listen to
this
us.
come
Listen
back
to
and
us
listen.
swear.
Yeah, but also,
And
when she can pop in
yeah,
and she's not going to bed before we record.
I told Carly when we started recording this. I mean, we're brother-in-laws, but I feel like we know each other so much more now than we did
Oh
when
yeah,
we
for sure.
started doing this podcast. So yeah, I find that to be just very interesting. But yeah, I'm very happy. 100 episodes. We have like we said at the beginning, we have a small following, but that really doesn't matter because we do it for fun. So F you, everybody who stopped listening to us. Also, I was
Well,
going to say, I wonder because our Wizards episode had a pretty good number of downloads. I
yeah, it was
wonder how
our
many people queued into it to be like, oh, yeah, Wizards. I love that movie. And then we just shat on it for like 45 minutes. I wonder how
uh
many listeners that lost us, but that's okay.
yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it was Ralph Bakshi and his extended family, in which case we're probably
Those,
gonna
those
they
were
were
all
gonna
backshees.
yeah, they weren't gonna stick around anyway. He's still like kicking a lot. He's still around. I think every once in a while he'll talk about when am I gonna do my animated Return of the King? But no one will give him the money.
Never.
Yeah, no one will
No.
give him the money. Yeah, no, I agree. It's been great. It's been great engaging with the audience that we have. For we've had some folks reach out to us and offer either critiques or well, mainly critiques, and then of course all the bots that we get telling us that our Facebook page is going to be shut down for copyright infringement. To which I say, bring it on, bot farmers. We can delete you and report you. It's no problem. No skin off our teeth.
I think our big thing is, or at least my big thing, I love the constructive criticism. And we've gotten a few individuals that have offered constructive criticism. So that's appreciated. So if you have constructive criticism, please reach out. If you're going to be a dick, keep it to yourself. Our change of pace. Sam, on episode 68 and 79 of Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things, we talked about our mead that we were making for the podcast. And when you were visiting in October, you had a chance to actually taste it. Should we talk about the podcast mead?
We should, with the caveat that I was a little under the weather on that trip, and especially the final 36 hours were dominated by me being under the weather, but then Haley being very much under the weather. And so I don't entirely recall the subtle details of the mead, but I'm more than happy to talk in
In loose
generalities.
loose terms. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
okay. So the mead itself was from the Skyrim Elder Scrolls themed cookbook. And I think it was the Horning Brew mead, I think was the take that they had on it. And I think I was talking to Carly about this when we were looking at the ingredients. It has yarrow in it, which is it's going to make something bitter. The mead itself is bitter. It has notes of that fruity juniper. But I think my problem in producing the mead was that I let the flowers steep a little too long. That's my self critique.
Oh, okay. Well, I see.
Because
I remember really, really, really liking that mead. I thought it was really good.
I wouldn't say that I don't like it.
Okay.
I just think it's more bitter than it was supposed to be. That's kind of how I came away from it.
Okay.
But it's still pretty good. I actually did not back sweeten it either. So that is just how it fermented out is what we
Hmm.
have.
Well, the I thought it was good. I am still waiting for you to ship me a bottle or some amount less than a bottle, a pint. I don't know. I don't know what's
We get
legal.
into the we get into the legality of
Yeah. Just
what I can and can't send.
say it's a health tonic and you'll be fine. Yeah, and then we also had some cinnamon mead, if I recall.
Yeah. So the three that I had you try were the juniper berry, cinnamon, and then a sizer. So instead of
Mm,
fermenting with water, you ferment with apple juice. I guess like organic apple cider, like more of a fresh pressed
hmm
cider. And that just ends up giving it a more full bodied, rounder flavor, which is interesting and nice. Also, you don't have to back sweeten because it has so much sugar content going into it, but pretty good. And we had a Lord of the Rings party last Saturday night where we went over to a friend's house and watched Two Towers. And it's really fun to get sauced on your own mead.
I bet.
Can confirm. I brought
I,
2 bottles and had a grand old time.
I mean, I maybe I've mentioned this on the pod before, but I don't drink that much anymore outside of a special occasion such as our visit to to Tacoma and celebrating, this podcast Mead and just trying the meats that you make, and then certain religious occasions, I I don't drink, and so um, I don't really have the opportunity to drink mead on a regular basis. But whenever I do it, I thoroughly enjoy it, and it's probably my like go-to if I have an excuse, if like it's a solid reason to like I if I wasn't under the weather, I would have sat in your house in Tacoma and had mead all day long. Uh, but unfortunately, that wasn't physically possible because I had to be again a responsible parent because the other parent was confined to the
Deathly
bathroom.
ill.
Anyway, so I'll say this: I'm looking forward to the next time you're in Michigan, and I hope you bring some bottles with you.
Well, that's our meat update, everybody.
Okay.
And then finally, yeah. So our last thing, we're going to talk a little Rings of Power at the end here. And Sam came across an article where, oh God, what are their names? Payne and McKay.
Yeah, JD Payne and Patrick McKay. So I saw I'll say one thing. What I would normally do is after I watch the episode of Rings of Power, and then I would avoid any sort of reviews, reactions, commentary until you and I had recorded. I didn't want to, by osmosis, pick up any ideas or come up with an observation that should have been credited to somebody else. But then after we record, I would go and I would consume a couple different reviews, and then because it took us a while to get our season finale and then our recap episode, I kind of did the same thing, but it was a little bit longer than normal. And then there's just been this explosion of reaction videos because people have had a little bit more time. And then parallel to that, and this is the connection to what we're talking about in just a second, the Rings of Power showrunners, McKay and Payne, have gone on a little interview and podcast circuit. And part of this is the certain commentators suspect is that they haven't been renewed for season 3. At least it hasn't been announced. And so this is kind of a publicity tour in order to generate, if you want to say, astroturf a positive fan reaction that get them a season 3. And I haven't been following as closely the audience scores, and like I think last time when season 1 wrapped up, we talked about how only X percentage of people who started finished, and only so many certain number of minutes. I haven't seen what those stats are for season 2 of the Rings of Power, but I know it was not really. I think the common critique was similar to what we said: better, but still not good, and some pretty significant errors. And this is the first time that I noticed in an interview setting or a publicity setting where they've actually answered questions about their thought process. And I have to say, they've confirmed some nagging suspicions that I've had that really make me continue to question their ability to be creative showrunners. And so I'm gonna set up a few things here. I'm just gonna get your reaction.
And I don't know. I haven't read the article, listened to the interviews, so I don't know what you're about to say, Sam. We'll see how this goes.
So they did an interview with Vanity Fair, and I like going to these interviews because they're usually very friendly. I think Vanity Fair has done some big behind the scenes photo spreads, and they got the pre-season 1, specials and things like that. So they're seemingly Amazon is very comfortable going to Vanity Fair. And so they talk about Celebrimbor a little bit, and they're very complimentary of those two actors' portrayal of that relationship over the course of the season. So I think we both agreed with that. It was really probably the best part of season 2. And then they start talking about the Balrog. And there's another thing here. This is McKay talking about kind of the Khazad-dûm storyline, the Balrog, and then the King Durin, and comparing him to Celebrimbor. And so this is quoting Patrick McKay. As far as King Durin, I think he's actually not dissimilar from Celebrimbor. He found a triumph in tragedy and defeat also. He fell into enemy hands, but was able to die on his own terms, heroically saving his son and putting the genie back in the bottle, at least for now. The interviewer's like, the genie you mentioned is the Balrog. It was unleashed from the mountain because the dwarves dug too deeply, and Sauron's ring motivated King Durin to do that. He frees the Balrog inadvertently, but is killed while trapping the creature again. And then the question from Vanity Fair is, why free the monster only to wall him off again? The McKay says, when you think about society-ending dooms, quite often it's not all in one fell swoop. It's a process. Two steps forward, one step back. Two step forward, one step back. Whether you want to think about the fall of the Roman Empire or climate change, these are things that take place over a period of time. Great kingdoms don't fall fast. A fuse is lit and burns brighter and brighter and brighter until it happens. We think that Balrog can function similarly. It represents that kind of generational doom rather than a bad thing that happened once.
That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
I knew you were going to say that.
Because why? You've just shown the dwarves that this giant fire demon killed your king and lives underneath you.
Yeah.
If they were smart, why would they dig deep? Like you got like that was the
Yeah. I mean, there's that, which to me, that's like the verisimilitude of it. Like nobody would say, oh, well, I guess because that cavern collapsed, that's the end of that problem. Like we'll never have to worry about that again. And they're either going to keep digging or they're going to just sit around and wait for the Balrog to reemerge. Like obviously that thing was malignant.
yeah. And
It's
why wouldn't the Balrog try
malevolent.
to like now the Balrog knows
Yeah.
this is a way out.
Yes.
You're telling
Eh,
me it's not going to like try to escape and it's just going to sit there again for another 1,000 years while we wait for the dwarves to forget about it and then dig deep again?
Yeah, and it's like, and then I just the comparisons that they make. So the fall of the Roman Empire or climate change. Like the fall of the Roman Empire was a multi, like it was multiple variables contributed to the fall of the Roman Empire. There's actually, a lot of people say, well, the Roman Empire didn't fall. You had the continuation in the Byzantine Empire. So there's like, that's a historical quibble. But it's like those were these multiple huge societal forces, inflation, the rise of Christianity, all these other things. And then climate change is this like scientific ecological phenomenon. But the Balrog is an entity that has a will, that has in Tolkien's universe, it is evil. Like it is solidly evil. It is a fire demon. It's not a force of nature that doesn't fit onto some sort of moral landscape. It's not something that is a negative consequence of people's actions that are inadvertent. It is evil. It has will. It has agency. It's not just going to sit there. Like
And
Tolkien doesn't
wait
explain.
since you woke it up. Yeah.
Yes,
And
like
it's on par with the stranger. Like they have the same power and self-thought and all of these things.
yes. So that was very frustrating. That was one of the most frustrating things. Just and I mean the other thing is this is often said. Tolkien hated allegory. People would say, "Oh, the Lord of the Rings it's allegory for World War II," and he would, like, "No, it's not. It's just a story. Like there are these themes, but it's just a story. It's
Mhm.
not an allegory for Hitler. It's not an allegory for World War II. It is what it is, and it's a story. If anything, Tolkien's been very clear about this. He was trying to come up with this legendarium, this imagined far history for Anglo-Saxon England, and that's why the languages are what they are. And he even comes up with this kind of overarching conceit that he just found these stories and translated them. And the reason that he can translate them is because they were written in Anglo-Saxon or a language similar to Anglo-Saxon, and he was, famously a scholar of Anglo-Saxon. So the big takeaways Tolkien wasn't writing allegories about the fall of the Roman Empire or climate change or Hitler or fascism or anything like that. He was just writing a story, and there were things in there that represented or reflected his worldview as a practicing, believing Catholic. And so, there is good, there is evil, there are souls, all of these other things, redemption and grace and all that other stuff. But, the Balrog symbolizing a force like climate change is very far from the vision of Tolkien, and it just demonstrates that they really don't have a grasp, one, on the material that they're dealing with, and two, just these other concepts in literature and storytelling.
What's another topic that they covered?
So it's not mentioned explicitly in this interview, but in a separate interview, the like Tolkien professor who is advising them says there isn't really a canon in Tolkien's works, which is also directly contradicted by things that Tolkien has said. and the immense effort of Christopher Tolkien to establish what the canon is and publish it, and the ongoing work of the Tolkien estate.
And to compile notes and
Yes,
books and
and
manuscripts and
then that's even contradicted by something they say in the there's a piece here where they're talking about Adar, and then they're talking about his. Let's see here. Names are so significant in the story. This is the interviewer. Sauron says repeatedly, I have many names, and the dark elf Adar's true identity has always been unknown. Adar just means father to the orcs, and in the final episode he says, this is the name I've earned. He doesn't say what his old name was. Is that still a relevant mystery now that he's dead? McKay says, he doesn't want to share it. I'm just not that person. I don't want to be that person. And then Payne says, that's not something we're holding back. He's not secretly some canon character. So oh, and then hold on here. In Tolkien lore, he talked about a couple different potential origins for orcs. One is that the elves have been tortured and poisoned and turned to this new life form that gave birth to this whole race of beings that became orcs. That means there must have been a missing link between the two. Like, okay, that's fine. But then the first thing about when Payne says he's not some secret canon character, like they're acknowledging that there is a canon and their
yes,
supposed
they're acknowledging that there's a canon. To me, the bigger issue is I don't think they know who Adar was. I don't think they've thought that through.
okay.
I think they just said the line because he says the line to Galadriel, help me earn my name back. I don't think they have given any thought as to who Adar actually was, personally.
I think you are right. And things are, and this is going to be, this idea is going to be supported by the next section and really the thing that is the most frustrating. And so, okay, this is talking about the stranger now. And this is a Vanity Fair. There have been clear signs that the wizard who fell to Middle Earth from the stars in season 1 is Gandalf. Until now, the character played by Daniel Wayman has only been called the stranger. But in the finale of season 2, his name is. What does it mean now that we know his identity for certain? And then McKay says, I don't know that we have successfully made this our rep, but we are really trying. We really are not trying to be clever for clever's sake. Bullshit. We are not trying to make little mystery games and puzzle boxes. Bullshit. We're really trying to play, and editorial, the bullshit is me inserting my comments. We're really trying to play with our cards open. Certainly that's true this season with Gandalf. In the last season, he was saying very Gandalfy things, talking in very Gandalfy ways. This article doesn't say it, does it? Oh, that's unfortunate. In a different interview, I think this was with Nerd of the Rings, a YouTube channel that's been very complimentary of the Rings of Power, and a lot of people accuse him of kind of selling out. But either way, in a different interview, McKay and Payne confirm that the stranger, they didn't know who he was during season 1. It was only between season 1 and season 2 that they decided to make him Gandalf. And
which if that's the case, if how does I'm going to say Bezos, but anybody who's making those decisions at Amazon, how do they allow such little thought to go into in the development of this series? Like if they're going to put arguably like $1 billion into this show, how do you not know who the stranger is? How do
yeah,
you not tell Charlie Vickers he's Sauron until halfway through season 1? How do
absolutely.
you not think through who Adar is? Like all of the Balrog just being bricked up again in this hole in the bottom of Moria. And it's like, how did it get to that point?
Completely. You think when these two guys are coming in, and by the way, I mean, I don't think we've talked about this before, but they don't have a track record in Hollywood. I think
Yeah.
they've
What did they do
never
before this?
they worked for what's his name, J.J. Abrams, and I think they have like a partial credit in 1 or 2 movies between the two of them.
Well, and
Not as
then
acting.
we think about Abrams and his failed Star Wars trilogy, where
Yeah.
they also didn't think things through
Yes.
about where the
Yeah.
story was going.
Completely didn't plan it out whatsoever. So so you think, yeah, in the pitch there would have been something like, and this is what we're going to do with these big characters. This is what's going to happen with Sauron. This is what Sauron was up to. This is what Galadriel, going through all of these characters. But and then even if it doesn't happen in the pitch, like let's just say that they were promising enough to get brought on board to be the showrunners. Aren't there other levels of approval and other things in development that there would be an opportunity for somebody like, whoa, 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 you need to establish who these like you need to establish what the reality of your world is. And I think that's something that's very frustrating. We talked about it before. Like when Tolkien was writing, he understood who was doing what, where, at any given point in his timeline for the Lord of the Rings, for the published works, not necessarily for things that he didn't write out of stories, which is, you know, that's one of the reasons why the Second Age gives you this blank slate from which you can fill in. But the first step should be figuring out, okay, what is the objective reality of this world, and then let's tell a story within that objective reality. It kind of struck me a little bit as I don't know if I haven't seen them use this word or this term, but the concept of being a garden writer as opposed to an architect, which is something that people always talk about in the context of George R. R. Martin, where I think George R. R. Martin has said himself, he doesn't have this overarching plan of everything that's going to happen. He lets the characters kind of tell the story. And that's fine until it's been 13 years since you've released a book in your series and your fans are getting fed up with it. And if you go back and look at some of the original pitch for the Game of Thrones, it was supposed to be a trilogy, and he had some crazy stuff that he planned out, but at least he had a plan, and then things changed. There's no evidence that there is a plan at all here. If that they didn't know that one of their main characters was actually Gandalf. Like that's a little bit beyond, oh, in the third book, this character might get into a relationship with this other character. It's like you don't even know who they are in episode one. So that to me was the biggest issue with this is that they just again confirm that they don't have an objective reality. And when you don't have an objective reality, stupid shit can happen on screen that doesn't make any sense, like Galadriel jumping off the boat or the
Or
Balrog seemingly being bricked up after the cavern collapses.
or Elrond kissing his future mother-in-law.
Or Elrond kissing his future mother-in-law. Did they talk about that here? I
No,
didn't
not
read. I
that.
didn't read the
Yeah,
entire thing. I
that's
mean,
okay.
we don't need to spend too much time going into it. The primary thing was I wanted to confirm with you that the Balrog is going back to sleep, and the
Yeah,
dwarves
apparently
seem
never going to be seen again.
never to be seen again, and not to worry the dwarves at all. And then that they didn't know who Gandalf was. They did say that it's very, 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 or excuse me, highly, highly, highly improbable that the Dark Wizard is Saruman. And then one of them adds, if not
Yeah,
impossible.
but that's the problem because they don't know.
Yeah, you could just be like, he's one of the Blue Wizards, and
Yeah, but they don't know that though.
I agree. Yeah, no, it's frustrating that they
That's
can't
the
just
problem.
say. Let's see.
And the show should have told, like, at least given us more of a hint about who the Dark Wizard is by now. And that's like we were talking about our season review. It's like you spend so little time because you have so many different plot lines that you're trying to cover that you very easily could have fleshed out this character and given us a clear story instead of having to wait until season 3 where you are like punting on making a decision about who this guy is. But I don't know, pisses me off.
Let's see here. Okay, here we go. So this is the interviewer talking. They're talking about kind of controversies or backlash. The other controversial thing I would say is Galadriel and Elrond and the smoochies for sure. And then that was McKay. And then Payne says, the kiss. And the interviewer says, I was going to bring up the kiss, which was a way for him to sneak a tool to her to unshackle herself. But you guys had to know what you were doing there. You knew that you were going to stir up the fan base. McKay, no, we did not. Not at all. We thought it was just a delightful way to show that he was sorry that he mistrusted her for so long and he loved her and he was going to have to leave her to her own fate. He needed to distract the room so that he could slip her a hope that maybe she could get out of there. A kiss means a different thing between elves. Thousands of years of friendship means a different thing to elves. The idea that it's shipping bait or we're trying to be controversial, dot, 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 to us, it made perfect sense, but maybe that's the problem. And then Payne adds, if you look at the long game for where the relationships are going, Galadriel will eventually be Elrond's mother-in-law. It's slightly eyebrow-raising about the fact that they would have kissed once. It's all part of it. And then the
It's
interviewer
all
says,
part of it.
yeah, it's all part of it. So, yeah, it's all part of what exactly?
Yeah,
interviewer
like
says,
their relationship
yeah, it's all part of their what will now be a really awkward relationship. And then the interviewer adds, stranger things have happened, man. And then McKay says, it's like Leia kissing Luke. That's not outrageous. It's just that she's trying to make Han Solo jealous in that moment because Han's being a jerk to her. So Elrond's kiss came out of their friendship, and it came out of the needs of that moment. We do not think we were at all being controversial or stirring the pot. I'm gonna about to go out on a limb here. I don't know that either Lawrence Kasdan, who wrote Empire Strikes Back, or George Lucas, who created the characters, knew definitively that Luke and Leia were brother and sister when that happened. And the
until
audience certainly didn't know that. And so it's a completely different thing. And obviously also it did not, and that scene was not cut. That scene was not scored or um, portrayed romantically. The kiss between Luke and Leia. It was very obviously Leia making a
trying to
point.
make Han jealous.
Yeah, trying to make Han jealous. And you see it's played for comedy with the way that Chewie and Luke react to it. This was completely different. Like there's romantic epic music playing in the background. He very tenderly touches her face romantically. He kisses her deeply. Like there is such a discrepancy between those two kisses that it's kind of, again, like, do you even understand what the output of your creative efforts is? Do you understand how this comes off to an audience? And then again, the people in the audience will know that Elrond and Galadriel will eventually be mother-in-law and son-in-law. Like people at the time that the Empire Strikes Back came out didn't know that Luke and Leia were brother and sister, nor did they know that Han and Leia would end up together in the next movie. So it's just like there's an issue with the canon again. Like people know what the canon is in Tolkien, and you're not going to throw it out, even though I will add they still have not introduced Celeborn.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about this anymore.
Yeah, it's really
I'm
frustrating.
just because it's election night. I think everybody's high strung already.
Yeah.
For our international viewers, yeah, I think regardless of who you want to win the US election, I think everybody's a little high strung today.
100%. Yeah.
And I'm already pissed. So then all of these stories just piss me off even more because it confirms all of our suspicions that we've had. And it's just stupid of them to go on to an interview and just admit to these things. Because then everybody who is pissed off about the show is like, yeah, you could tell because the show sucks. And these are the reasons why we think it sucks. And you've just admitted to everything.
Yes.
So here we are.
Our take on Rings of Power season 2 has not changed. It sucks.
But we'll see you in 2 years when season 3 comes out.
Yeah, hopefully they can establish an objective reality for their show before that time.
God, if our podcast is still going on in 2 years, we'll see.
Well, on that topic, so upcoming, we will cover season 3 of The Legend of Vox Machina. At some point, the Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim will be released.
Yes, Vox Machina season 3. I've already watched it. I'm going to go back and rewatch for our recordings, but high praise from me so far.
That's good. I have not watched on the first episode. That's on me and being very busy, but I will get to it and we will cover it here and share that with you all. And then I guess the other thing, but I haven't seen any dates, is The Witcher season 4, which we referenced at the top of this episode. We will cover it. We are committed to it. Sean has already announced that he will probably not like it, and I don't think there's any reason that I would like it.
Oh, Witcher?
Witcher season 4, yeah.
Oh,
They're going to have to work very hard to win us over.
Yeah, we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Okay. All right, Sean. Well, congratulations on 100 episodes. Thank you for co-hosting along the way. And thank you, audience, for tuning in. And we will see you in this space. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.
Bye.